Long before money was invented, people lived very happily. They helped each other and produced things. They lived in small communities and everyone remembered who gave what to whom. In this way, who owed who and who had credit did not get mixed up. But when communities grew, things became a little complicated. Everyone's production increased. The people who ruled put taxes, and keeping track of all this trading became harder and harder. People might have thought, what if I just write it on paper? But it wasn't possible to know the whole society, and this didn't really work. For this reason, people started to use objects like whale teeth as a kind of IOU accepted by the whole society. This way you could exchange and store the goods you had much more easily. In short, while people were creating money, they were also creating debt. Everything that was used as money in barter had some problems. Barley was heavy and not durable. Whale teeth could not be divided. Seashells were found on every shore, so they were not very valuable. Kings thought a lot about solving this problem and decided to mint officially stamped coins from precious metals. Coins were small, durable, and easy to carry, and because gold and silver were rare, they were valuable. Over time, some rulers acted cleverly by making the coins thinner or mixing cheap metals into them to reduce their value. Carrying kilos of metal coins was very difficult and very dangerous. For this reason, Chinese rulers began to protect heavy metal coins inside their palaces and started to conduct trade using paper promissory notes. The paper notes had no value by themselves, but everyone knew that if they wanted, they could still exchange them for gold or metal money. In a short time, the idea of paper money spread around the world. But people became uneasy. Money can be printed so easily because what if too much of it is printed? Because of this, the rulers of countries continued to tie money to gold for a long time, until this system was completely abandoned in the 1970s. Today, the only thing that determines the value of a banknote is simply the trust people have in it. Yap Island's Rye stones are giant circular limestone discs with a hole in the center, and they are one of the most fascinating forms of currency in the world. Some reach up to 12 feet, about 3.6 meters, in diameter. Despite being extremely large and difficult to move, they were used as money. The value of a rye stone depended not only on its size and craftsmanship, but also on its history, who brought it, and how difficult the transportation process had been. If someone died during the transport, the stone became even more valuable. These stones were quarried on the island of Palau, about 250 miles away, and transported to Yap on bamboo rafts through a dangerous ocean journey. Because of this, every stone carried its own story. The stones began to be used around 500 AD and played an important role in major social transactions such as marriage, inheritance, agreements, and social status. In the 19th century, Captain David Dean O'Keefe made the transportation process easier by bringing in many more stones using more modern methods. This increased the number of rye stones on the island and impacted the local economy. In the 1500s, Spain brought tons of gold and silver from its colonies. Everyone thought this would create great wealth, but they were wrong. When too much money entered the market, merchants began raising the prices of their goods. In other words, there was more money, but the same amount of products. The result? Inflation. The newly arrived gold only benefited the debtors. Their money increased, but their debts stayed the same. This event is often told as historical proof of the idea that when there is too much money, its value decreases. In the 18th century, the Kingdom of England told its colonies in the American continent, "You will use only the British pound. You are forbidden to print your own money." This forced the American colonies to trade exclusively with England. Benjamin Franklin stated that this economic pressure from the British was one of the major causes of the American Revolutionary War. After the colonies won the war, they created the American dollar. Because the United States had a strong economy and a reliable trade system, the dollar eventually became the most widely used currency in the world. However, as countries began accumulating dollars, the United States came to hold the dominant power over global trade through control of the world's money. By the 19th century, banking had become a respectable profession. Banks profited by collecting money at low interest rates and lending it out at higher rates. Then they realized something important. Not everyone who deposited their money came to withdraw it at the same time. Therefore, they began lending far more than they had in their vaults. This system was called fractional reserve banking. However, in times of crisis, when everyone rushed to withdraw their money at the same time, everything fell apart. Banks began to go bankrupt, Governments stepped in to solve this problem by insuring deposits. By the 20th century, some banks were no longer financing loans with deposits, but were also borrowing large amounts from other banks. When the panic started in 2007, the system was no longer just a banking problem. It spread and affected the whole world. Economists talk about two types of money. Inside money, created by banks. Outside money, created by the government. When banks issue loans, they actually create new money within the system. This is known as private sector debt. The government, on the other hand, creates new money by issuing and selling bonds. But this adds to public debt. In 2008, governments used these bonds to purchase the bank's toxic assets. The bad loans were wiped out, and banks were able to continue operating as if they had not taken losses, but public debt grew massively. When the dollar was no longer backed by gold in 1973, it became a currency independent of anything else. In 2008, when the U.S. printed a large amount of money to recover from the economic crisis, some expected the dollar to collapse. However, the dollar remains very strong. So how does the dollar manage to stay so strong? Because a large portion of the world holds its wealth in dollars. People's trust in the dollar is what keeps it strong. Today, cash is used in only about 2% of all transactions. Cards, electronic banking, and massive operations carried out in seconds now dominate the financial world. Moreover, digital currencies like Bitcoin have emerged. They are divisible, difficult to counterfeit, and have a limited supply. However, unless a government begins collecting taxes in Bitcoin, or banks start issuing loans in Bitcoin, they do not go much further than the stone money on Yap Island or whale teeth, forms of currency with limited practical use. And then comes the question, how are those who hold absolute power over money choosing to use that power?